Welcome back to the main stage. I am delighted to welcome Bobby Pickard from BP. We're just having a really, really powerful conversation. So I'm excited to watch your presentation and then open for Q&A after. But Bobby, over to you.
Thanks so much, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me. Let me just share my screen and get started for you. So what I wanted to do is to go through how it feels to not be yourself at work, and some of the things that you can bear in mind if you do want to come out at work. You know, it's a very interesting fact, actually, that lots of people, before they start their first job, are actually already out of the closet. But then when they do start their first job, they actually go back into the closet. And that's one of the things that I think we need to be really, really aware of as employers. And also something that those employees, those first employees, need to be aware of, that that's not something that they need to do if they find the right place to work at. So my name is Bobby Pickard. I am Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Manager at BP. I'm a very proud member of BP Pride UK and have been for many years, and ran the trans and non-binary people's group. I'm the CEO of Trans in the City, which is the world's largest corporate collaboration on trans awareness, and we've got 360 corporates globally now. I've been privileged and very embarrassed to win lots of things over the last couple of years, as well as raising lots of money for charity through Trans in the City and some of BP's work. One of the things that I always like to start every single one of my courses is the elephant in the room slide. And really what I cover in this is what transgender isn't. Hopefully you'll be aware of what transgender is and what transgender isn't. Transgender isn't the same as transvestism, cross-dressing. There's an overarching term called trans, which covers everything that's gender non-conforming, really, whether that's transvestism or cross-dressing or drag, or actually some butch lesbians identify as trans. Lots of gender non-conforming people identify as trans. Some non-binary people identify as trans, and under that umbrella of trans is transgender as well. And you can think of transgender in its simplest possible way as somebody that was assigned a biological sex of one thing. So the biological sex of their body is one thing, and the sex of their brain, their gender, is something different. Gender is an infinitely varying spectrum, exactly like biological sex. So you can be anywhere on that spectrum. And actually, you know, we have some amazing terms like non-binary now, which is basically just saying that you're not at either the male or the female end of the spectrum, but you're something somewhere in the middle. Terms you shouldn't use when we come to the Q&A, what you shouldn't ask, nothing. Ask what you like. Use whatever terms you like. You absolutely can't offend me. I always offer a box of chocolates to anybody actually that can ask me a question that's so politically incorrect and offensive that I won't answer it. So I'll do that now. If you can ask me a question that I absolutely would not answer, then I will buy you a box of chocolates. Some of the things we'll cover might be difficult to hear. Being trans, actually being LGBTQIA, I feel is an absolute gift. I think it's wonderful. I think it gives you an amazing perspective on life. I think it makes you far more of an empathic person. I think it lets you belong to what I think is the most amazing community that there is, and that's the Pride community. But not everything about that is happy, and we might be touching on some things like depression or suicidal ideation. So just a quick warning for anybody that might have a trigger around those subjects, that we might touch on those as we go through the rest of this presentation. So I guess the real question is, why aren't people themselves at work? And it's a very complex answer. Our society is very much geared up to want to put people into boxes. And with those boxes comes expectation. So when we're talking about things like gender, our society is very much geared up to be male or female. And all of our education systems, especially in the past, are very much geared up to tell people that there's only one thing or another. There's only male or female people. But actually, you know, we've known since at least the 1950s that gender and biological sex are a spectrum, and people can be anywhere on those scales. The trouble is that because there is those expectations in society, there's a huge amount of pressure on people to conform and be either male or female. And anybody that falls outside that area is then subjected to the full wrath of society for being different. And sometimes that's just societal pressure, but actually these days, especially on social media, that's taking the form of abuse. And some of the abuse, especially that trans people are experiencing at the moment, are absolutely huge. 99% of trans people have experienced some form of abuse, either in person or online, in the last year. 65% of trans people are scared to leave their house, let alone be out as themselves at work. When we look at things around sexuality, so whether people are lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual or queer, we see the same sorts of pressures as well. You know, the media over the last 40, 50 years has driven again this agenda that people should conform to what society feels are the right set of criteria. And really, you know, from Victorian times, from the middle of the 1860s, when, you know, the term heterosexual and homosexual came into vogue, since that time, society has very much seen anybody that has a sexuality different to heterosexual as being in some way a deviant or untrustworthy. Now, thankfully, those views are really changing, but the societal pressure still remains. And what we find is that those organizations that aren't open to support people, and more importantly, allow those people of different genders and sexualities to stand up for themselves and be proud and be supported and be completely supported by the organization, very, very loudly supported by the organization, won't feel comfortable to come out as themselves at work. Because nobody likes being the person that's being held up to ridicule, that's being given lots of pressure by their workmates. They don't like hearing people talking about them behind their backs. Nobody likes receiving abuse. With new employees is interesting because even those organizations that actually are supportive of people's sexualities and genders don't get that message across to young workers when they join, or more importantly, when they're looking to join. And that's a huge, huge thing that our organizations need to improve and get better at. Is it good to be out at work? Yes and no. It's always better to be yourself. You know, if you're not yourself, if you're projecting a version of yourself that's fake, that's somebody else, then you'll see that projection receiving all of the attention, all of the love, all of the fun, all of the laughter, and you'll start to think that the real you is somebody that won't be able to receive any of that, and it will start a downward spiral. As well as that, that projection won't be able to make proper social network connections. So you won't be able to connect to people in a close way. And if you can't connect to people in a close way in a work environment, you won't be able to be an effective part of a team. You won't be able to enjoy working in an environment. You won't be able to make those connections and those links of trust with your co-workers. Being yourself enables all of those things. So if you're yourself and you're supported to be yourself, then you will be a better worker. And we can see in some of the reports that we've seen come out that actually it's around about 30% of someone's brain power gets used by doing that filtering, doing that projection of a fake version of themselves. So you become a lot more productive, and actually those work environments that allow people to be themselves are shown to make better decisions, be more innovative, and be more profitable as organizations. So there's a big business case there for allowing people to be themselves. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because if you do come out as yourself at work, then there's a tendency for you to become under the spotlight. So I came out at work about 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. And I chose actually to be very visible in my coming out and my transition, because not many people in the world know about trans people, especially old dinosaurs my age. So I chose to be very visible with my coming out and my transition. And that has huge benefits for organizations because they learn from me. But it also puts me under the spotlight constantly, all of the time, every single day. And we have to be careful with individuals that do want to come out, that do want to be role models, that we're actually giving them the support needed to come out. Whether they want to be role models and visible or not, we need to make sure that we have the support structures in place with their managers and their teams and their co-workers. So actually coming out isn't something that's another burden for somebody, another thing to work at. It's something that's hugely, hugely positive. And coming out at work should be a hugely positive thing. If you bring your proper self to work, you should be happier. You should feel more comfortable. You should feel more of a whole person. You should be able to come into work and talk about your private life like every other person, like heterosexual cisgender people do all of the time. You know, that privilege should come to everybody, including those on the LGBTQIA spectrum. So how do you do it? Well, you're going to be really disappointed because there's no set way to do this. You know, in terms of me, so I reached the stage, as I say, 4 or 5 years ago, where I decided that I wanted to come out very visibly at work. I'd reached the stage where I needed to medically transition. So actually I didn't have a choice really to come out or not. I chose to come out very organically. Lots of trans people take the, I call it the big bang approach. So, you know, they'll leave on a Friday and they'll come into work as their authentic self on a Monday. So there'll be a very short, sharp transition. I chose to evolve my transition over, I think it was about sort of 6 or 7 months. So I told everybody, and then slowly over those 6 or 7 months, I slowly brought more and more of my authentic self into work. And that was actually a really easy way for me to do it, a way that didn't actually give me a lot of stress, because I could just go at my own pace. That going at your own pace is actually something that's really, really important when you think about coming out of the closet. And there's loads of different ways and degrees, obviously, that you can do that. So for trans people, for instance, non-binary people, coming out tends to be a very loud and very obvious thing. Trans and non-binary people tend to have to come out to everybody, whether they know them or not, whether they want them to know that they're trans or not. You know, I used to come out to people walking past them at the street or standing in the queues at the petrol station, and that's not an uncommon experience for trans people. For other people on the LGBTQIA spectrum, sometimes you have a bit more choice about how far you want to come out and how much you want to come out to your organization. So you can come out and be your authentic self to just your teammates, or you can come out to maybe your larger department, or actually maybe just a couple of friends. Or if you want to be a role model, then you can come out to absolutely everybody. But the way you should do that is in a way that's good for your comfort zone. Always, when you're thinking about coming out, try and get some close friends, some close contacts next to you first that you know will back you up, support you, hold you up sometimes if you're having really bad times. If your organization has a business resource group or an employee resource group, so, you know, like a pride organization, and most organizations these days have something, contact them. You know, these are the people in the organization that are in the pride community, and they know what it's like. They've already come out, and they will be so supportive and so helpful for your journey to coming out. If you're out before you join a company, don't go back in the closet. Don't feel pressured going back into the closet. And this really is the challenge of finding the right place to work. Because what you should be doing before you join a company is doing your research on that company. So look at the company, do a search on them, Glassdoor, do a search on them on Google, search for your diversity. So do a search on BP and transgender, see what they're doing, see what they're saying about your diversity, because that will give you a really, really good indication on whether that company is the right company for you. And frankly, it doesn't matter how good a name the company is, how much money the company wants to give you, what the work is going to be, how exciting the work is going to be. All of those are important, but the most important thing is whether you'll be happy in a company and whether you'll be a fit for that company. Because if you're not happy and you're not a fit in that company, you won't stay. It doesn't matter how much you're being paid, your life will be miserable and you won't stay. So do your research on the company. You know, most companies, most global corporates these days, most national sized companies are very, very much interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we know that we get the most out of our people if they're happy, if they're fulfilled, and most importantly, if they're themselves. So really, really put some of that research into any company that you're thinking of joining. When you go to an interview, ask them directly. There's nothing stopping you either when you get offered an interview for a company, asking to talk to the diversity, equity, and inclusion team if you're a member of a minority, and asking their position, asking what their position would be for interviewers when they're interviewing you. We always get interviewed by companies. It's really important that you interview the company back. And no company that has diversity, equity, and inclusion at its heart will feel in any way put out if you ask it to show that that's the case. So what is there in summary that I can tell you? Not being in the closet, being your true self, being happy with your life, not having to spend your time projecting an image of somebody you're not, is probably the most important thing you'll ever do in your life, because those things, being your true self, is the only way you'll truly be happy. And being happy in yourself brings happiness to everything else. If you're not happy in yourself, you'll never be happy in your career. You'll never be happy in your wider life. If you can be true to yourself, you can be true to everything else in your life. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have loads of challenges in your life, because everybody will have challenges in your life. That doesn't mean that your life is going to be a great bed of roses, but you'll have that foundation of truth about yourself that will allow you to build on that foundation and create a successful career and a successful life. I'm going to stop speaking now, and we'll go back to the Q&As. I'm sure there's quite a lot that we can expand on, and so I'll hand back to Chris.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. I think I could agree with every single word you said in terms of living as your authentic self. And as soon as you come to terms with that and you're in that space, it is almost like your life changes, right? It's almost like you see life in a bit of a different way, and you then look for your place to fit in, almost. We've got so many questions, and I'd like to sort of go through them all with you. But I guess keeping it, first of all, relative to where you work, and all you've got to do is go on Bobby's LinkedIn and you will see the amount of work that you're doing, not only from a professional perspective, but also in your personal time within the trans space. And we were talking around how it's Trans Awareness Week coming up, and of course,
Yes,
there'll be a lot of conversation around that. But someone's asked, do you feel there's a good supportive network at BP? And I would expand on that and say, how has that changed over the years as well? Because you've sort of gone in and out of BP, I guess. So what difference have you seen, and where does it sort of stand now in 2021?
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. And you know, the short answer to that is yes, there absolutely is an amazing support network in BP. BP Pride, which is our LGBTQIA organisation, has given me so much love and so much support over the years. You know, funnily enough, I was a consultant. I actually had my own computer consultancy, so I wasn't even a BP employee. I just happened to be working at BP when I came out 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I forget now. It's crazy, isn't it? But so, you know, I wasn't actually even an employee of BP when I came out. and yet I just got unconditional support from BP Pride. I actually remember I went into one of my managers' offices who actually ran the Allies network in BP Pride. And I was fully expecting to be told that I'd have to leave BP and go and get a job somewhere else. I told him that I was transgender. I told him that I was going to have to transition. And, in those days, BP's been a very inclusive company for a long time. BP Pride stretches back, I think, 17 years now.
Wow.
But BP's trans awareness was very low at the time. And the manager I spoke to, I know for a fact that he knew absolutely nothing about transgender people or non-binary people. It took him about a second to, you could almost see the coins drop in his head. And he just turned around and said, you know what, we always say that everybody should be able to be themselves at work. They should be able to bring their real self to work. And you're no different. So do what you need to do. And we'll fully support you. And they absolutely did, to the point, it was, he was a senior manager. I think he was third from the top of BP. And he was checking up on me at least once a week to see how I was getting on. I started doing trans awareness courses, sessions in BP, and they gave me so much support to do that. And as a contractor, that's almost unheard of from any other company. And it's I just got so much love from BP, full stop. I mean, in my transitioning is a very, very hard thing to go from. And I'd come from a very, actually, when I started transitioning, I'd come from a very, very dark place in my life. 92% of trans people have suicidal ideation, 48% attempt suicide sometime in their life. And I fall in those statistics. And I'd actually just come from the last bad place before I decided I had to transition. And it was really the support I got from BP and my friends that I made that really helped me put all of that behind me and transition. I used to have people every day stop me in the corridor and give me a hug and tell me that they were rooting for me. So so much love I got from BP. And that's actually globally, BP works in some places where it's not acceptable or it's illegal to be LGBTQIA. But I get as much positivity from our employees in those areas as well than I do in the UK and the US and other regions. So it's wonderful. Have I sold it enough? I think I've sold it enough, have I?
I think you have. I was just thinking how that could have easily been the other way if you worked for an organisation where you weren't supported.
Absolutely.
And how awful that situation then could have been.
Absolutely. And that's the bit that goes back to the what I was saying about interview your organisation, because I could have had that conversation with a manager that wasn't as brilliant as the one I did, and I could have lost my job, and I could have, not had anything that I've got now.
Yeah, no, I think it is so important. I think, and there is a difference, right, of sexual orientation and gender identity, because I know certainly in my time it's easy for me to hide. I mean, dependent what top I'm wearing and what sort of
how many sparkles.
But transitioning at work is such a visual, or certainly can be such a visual process. So there's some, questions. I'm going to sort of group them together to similar themes. But when you said some people take that sort of big bang approach, like, going to finish on the Friday, going to come in on Monday as my true self. These are my pronouns. This is my real me.
Yes.
What what type of things, not only did BP offer, but what type of practical steps did people get around you where, we've met today and you're incredibly open. You said, ask me anything. But that's one of the main fears where people don't speak up. And we were talking about this before we went live.
Yes.
What sort of practical steps did people get around you to be able to comfortably say, I might not know everything around this, but what can I be doing to be a supporter or to be an ally? We hear it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I guess I was a bit of a pioneer in BP. So I was the first openly trans person in BP that really stood up and sort of said, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And I guess, I guess I was fortunate because I'd actually spent 15 years researching everything about trans, the causes. I'd read every medical journal inside out. I'd done that really sort of like nerdy propeller heady type thing and just absolutely read everything. So actually when I came out, I was very much, and I guess I still am, a subject matter expert on transgender and non-binary. At the time, BP wasn't really trans aware, but they gave me the support to really shape it. These days, if somebody comes out as trans or non-binary in BP, then we have a suite of training packages. So we train all of their team, we train all of their line management, all the way up to the executive suite. They get trained. We have, I'm very fortunate these days to be in diversity, equity and inclusion in BP, which I absolutely love. But that means that they get to talk to me. I don't know, is that a good thing or not? I think it probably is a good thing. So, every trans person gets to talk to me, and we really understand every trans person's journey is different. And what we try to do is to support them in that journey. We don't dictate what that journey is, where that starts or stops or goes. But what we try to do is make it as transparent and as easy and supportive for everybody. So we really tailor everybody's transition in BP. And that transition is massively supported in BP with its healthcare package. I think BP's healthcare package for trans and non-binary people is probably the best in the world. So we cover anything that falls under the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So, we're not just covering gender confirmation surgery, we're covering anything that a trans person needs as part of their transition. And I think those two things together really, hopefully, makes it a really successful place for trans and non-binary people to go to. And, it's that old thing, that if you can get trans and non-binary right in terms of diversity and inclusion, then the chances are you've got all of the other stuff right.
Yeah.
Because the other stuff is more established and in lots of ways easier to resolve. And I think there's lots of really great companies. I have to say that because there's loads of them in trans in the city, I really think BP are definitely leading the way with trans and non-binary people at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And what you've said there is the trans experience is not universal. It's not a cookie cutter. We're going to
absolutely not
this. And I feel like sometimes organizations in the past have applied that. They've sort of lifted and shifted a policy, but it's got to be unique to the individual. One thing that I've sort of asked every speaker is, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? And what part of your life would you be at?
That's a very... So I normally get asked, what would I tell my 12-year-old self? So it's a nice twist you've done in that. So you know what? There's loads and loads of times in my past where I've come really, really close to not being here. The last time, as I said, was 2016. I was really close to not going on the journey that I've been on. And I guess really what I'd say is all of those times from when I was about 14, when I first almost didn't make it. And, 2 or 3 times a year, really, that I was on that massive roller coaster up until a couple of years ago. The one bit of advice that I'd go back and give myself is just give it one more day. Those times when, we get those, especially in the LGBTQIA communities, because we're under a lot of pressure at the moment. Trans people especially are under immense pressure from the government and from the media. It can feel hopeless. But don't give up hope, and just give it one more day. And there's so many people working behind the scenes that you won't see, that are trying to make the world a better place, and especially for young people. I think it's certainly for me, I don't do anything that I do for myself. I do it really for the, it sounds all really dramatic, doesn't it? Do it for the people that follow, the people that are to follow.
Well, we thank you very much for doing it, and the world is certainly a better place for you being in it. So, Bobby, thank you so much. Expect several LinkedIn messages from me coming up.
Your pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate this, and we will speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Chris.
For those watching, we will finish today with a panel discussion that will start at 5:30. So grab a cup of tea, and join me in thanking Bobby. Thank you very much.